time for us to find out what is going on in that big wide world we call Westminster. Maria Caufield is here. She's the Health Minister, and we're going to speak to her right now. Maria, very good morning to you. Welcome to the show.
Good morning, Mike.
Thanks very much indeed for joining us. We all woke up this morning to a bit of a shock. Rishi Sunak's going to speak later today about how we are about to enter a very dangerous era here in the UK, where the three sort of main problems are going to be caused by AI, by migration, and also by, autocratic countries like Russia and China. Are we entering a dangerous era?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think the threat has significantly increased since Russia invaded Ukraine. We're seeing over the weekend that Russia's, making gains, and we know that their plans aren't just to stop at Ukraine if they were successful there. Having a war in Europe has significantly impacted on all of us. We obviously are supporting Ukraine financially, but it has had a significant effect on all our household incomes with the price of oil and energy increasing. But we do have other threats. AI, for example, is a significant threat. That wasn't a problem 10, 15, 20 years ago, but going forward, when so much of our society is based on technology, an AI threat can have a significant impact on our infrastructure at a moment's notice.
Right. But I mean, people are saying to me today, what Rishi Sunak will say this afternoon is that almost every aspect of our lives is going to change. Well, if that's the case, I mean, there's not much you can do about it, is there?
Well, one of the things that he is committed to is the increase in defence spending of 2.5%, which is a significant increase and one that Labour won't commit to, because we recognise that we need to be bringing together our armed forces and our technology and really assessing the threats and meeting the threats and challenges that we're facing, whether that's from Russia, whether that's from China, whether that's from AI across the board or other sources of conflict. We saw in Israel, for example, a few weeks ago where Iran used the latest drone technology to be able to fire missiles into Israel. We need to look at our capability and make sure we're up to any threat that we're facing, and increasing defence spending is a key part of that, and so far we're the only party who's committing to that increase.
Yeah, I mean, I was told by several defence experts that had Iran decided to fire all those missiles at us, we wouldn't have been as successful at stopping them from hitting targets because we don't have the Iron Dome. Is he going to say that he wants us to have some kind of defence system like that?
Well, I'm not going to preempt what the PM is going to say. I don't know what his speech contains in detail, but it's that sort of threat that we are reassessing and we are prioritising our funding for. The first role of government is the defence of a nation, and when the threats are increasing, whether it's a war in Europe, which we have right now, which, if that went terribly wrong and Ukraine was defeated, then that comes even closer to our doorstep. But also what's happening in the Middle East has an impact. We see, the impact on our shipping, for example, with the attacks by the Houthis. That impacts on our supplies, even just coming to this country. So there are increased threats. We know in terms of terrorist attacks here in this country over recent years, we've had a number of those. So we need to be much more on the alert, and we need the funding to make sure that our defences are up to the job. And that's what the Prime Minister will be setting out this morning.
Sure. But it would be fair to say, would it not, and critics of the government would say, that over the last 14 years, defence spending has not been a priority, and in fact, the numbers of people in the armed forces has been diminished. The numbers of sort of military hardware that we've got has been diminished, and we're no longer what you might call a sort of a military power in the world.
Well, we have been increasing defence spending, and we're committing to increase it by 2.5%. But I think just before Russia, the threat assessment, and I'm not a military expert, but the threat assessment was a very different one. It was much more technology-based rather than boots on the ground, and there was a shift to investing in that sort of level of technology. We need to do both now. We've seen that in Russia there is the use of tanks, there is the use of troops, and so we have to reassess that threat based on the events in the last couple of years.
Right. A lot of people back home, I suppose you might say on the domestic front, more concerned about things like the NHS, things like, the long-term sick problem that we have at the moment. Obviously, there are some policies coming out this week from the government about all of that. You've got more medical school places to tell us about. Tell us what that's for.
Yeah, so we're doubling the number of medical school places to increase that supply of doctors coming through the system. There's 350 this year, 205 next year, but it will be 7,500 in total. And we're targeting them to the parts of the country where they have the greatest shortage of doctors at the moment, because we know doctors like nurses and dentists and physios, where they train, they tend to stay. So if we train them in areas where there's shortages, we're likely to see an increase in the number of doctors coming through the system. This is part of our wider work in terms of funding the NHS, but funding it for frontline services to those things that will make a difference. And it builds on the work we're doing with our 40 new hospitals, with our over 100 surgical hubs across England, 160 rapid diagnostic centres. So real frontline stuff that patients will actually feel the difference when they're trying to get treated.
And what about the civil service? Because we're reading as well this morning that there have been an awful lot of problems with the civil service. We're told that the civil service are kind of opposing a plan the government's got to list by the country the sort of criminality that's going on with certain people who come into this country illegally. We've also been told that they might be going on strike. We know they're not keen on some of the border force activities. We're told that some civil service might be now going on strike because they're not happy about some transphobic government policies. I mean, isn't it time we did something about civil service as well?
Well, part of the reason we're able to increase defence spending by 2.5% is that actually we're going to be reducing the number in the civil service to back down to pre-pandemic levels, because we did need an increase in resources during those times. Those are not necessarily required now, and that's where we're finding the savings so that we can pay for some of these things like an increase in defence spending. You know, we've been pretty clear, as I say this as a health minister, in relation to protecting women's same-sex spaces and actually, you know, moving away from some of this ideology which has driven, you know, health service, you know, education as well. The CAST report, you know, was really a game changer that we commissioned, which led us to block puberty blockers for children, close down one of those clinics that was leading on this. So there is a real shift in our approach to this, but absolutely in terms of the civil service, we'll be reducing those numbers, and that money will be going into defence spending.
Okay. Are you expecting any more defections this Wednesday, just before Prime Minister's questions?
I don't know. I mean, I think people get frustrated because, you know, who knows?
Yes. No. Listen. I'll let you recover. Because I mean, as far as Natalie Elphicke goes, I mean, we saw the story at the weekend where she was supposedly, she denies it, but she supposedly was attempting to try and get a sort of a special deal, shall we say, for her husband, so he could move the trial date so that it would be more convenient for him. The Labour Party say, well, there's nothing to see here, and if the Tories really wanted to investigate what she was doing, why didn't they do it at the time?
Well, I think people are really fed up with this kind of game playing of politics. You know, we're busy. You know, the Prime Minister's going to be making a statement about defence spending today and defending our country. We've made an announcement today about increasing the number of medical school places. And meanwhile, Labour are playing, you know, school ground politics. That's not what the public want, and I hope they see the difference. We've got a plan for defence, for the economy, for the health service, and we're almost turning a corner post-COVID. Labour just want to pinch MPs and play school game politics. That's not what the country needs.
Let's just finish. I'm sorry, I know your voice is going, Maria, but let me just try and get you on this one. A good story in the Times today saying that new mothers risk suffering lifelong injuries as hospitals cover up failings, according to an inquiry which has found that good care for pregnant women is the exception rather than the rule. I say to people all the time, surely the NHS needs to tighten its belt and do better. Not everything can be blamed on the Tory government. Why is it that pregnancy and maternity care in this country is so bad?
Well, I think for years maternity's been the Cinderella service of the health service, and you know, if you talk to women over the last 20, 30 years, they've had often bad experiences. We're changing that, so some of the things we're putting in, for example, we're putting in perinatal, what's called pelvic health services. So women are at high risk of having birth trauma during their labour can be identified early on and measures put in place. That could reduce birth trauma by about 20%. We're doing that right now. But obviously these things take a while to make a difference. So we do recognise the situation in maternity services, but we have got a plan to change that. We've got an increase in 21% of midwives, for example, and it is about taking that waste out of the NHS in terms of bureaucracy and putting it onto frontline staff, which is what we're doing.
Okay. Well, thank you for your time. I appreciate it, especially with the little tickle in the throat there. One final question for you. Did you see the Northern Lights?
I didn't. They were in my area, but unfortunately I was in bed asleep, so I missed them completely.
Oh, well, never mind. Next time, I mean, they're going to happen again in about 100 years, I think. Maria, thank you very much indeed. Maria Caufield, their Health Minister, on a whole variety of things.